Hello, my name is Jeanette Sjoberg, and I am an associate professor in pedagogy at Halmstad University, Sweden.
And hello, I'm Eva Brooks, work as a professor at Aalborg University in Denmark, and I'm professor in IT-based design, learning and innovation. And the paper that we are going to present today is titled Pedagogical Integration of Digital Game-Based Learning and the Processes Involved.
The study on which this presentation is based was conducted within the research project Digital Computer Games for Learning in the Nordic countries. This was a Nord+ funded collaboration project between 5 universities in the 5 Nordic countries. The overall aim with the project was to provide teachers and other professionals who are willing to employ digital games in a learning context with relevant sources.
So the background to the paper that we are presenting here is related to digital game-based learning and includes that the teachers, they have a hesitation to include digital game-based learning in their teaching activities. And that can be exemplified that they experience a lack of technology resources, they experience technological confusions or problems, and there could be a lack of knowledge to use the technology. But however, there is relatively little research that highlights the teachers' views on the integration of DGBL in teaching activities. There are also factors that influence the use of DGBL in teaching and learning. And that is, research shows that on the one hand, teachers believe that there is a great potential in using games in educational setting, and they consider them as to be important educational tools. But then on the other hand, they are reluctant to use them themselves in their own teaching because they are unsure about how they to incorporate them. So it's important to research on and to understand how these resistance and constraints, how they emerge. And another crucial related work is related to teachers and how they need to be provided with professional development. There are studies that shows that it is a critical component to recognize teachers' role in designing teaching activities, including DGBL, and how to facilitate these intended learning designs.
So the research question we ask in this paper are, how do teachers evaluate the designs of digital games in relation to how they support or hinder learning? And what kind of constraints do teachers identify while translating educational games?
And the theoretical framework that we apply here is based on activity theory. And we can see here, if I take the pointer here, this is the original activity model developed by Vygotsky and Leontiev, where there is a unit, the activity is a unit focusing on interactions between subject and object in a process where transformations should be or are achieved. And the interaction is based on the mediation by tools which shape this ongoing interaction. And activity theory is extensively used in the field of learning, but less used in the study of games. And this original model, if you call it that, is further developed by Yrjö Engeström and his colleagues. And he described an activity as a collective phenomenon, conceptualized as an activity system, as we can see in this figure here, still in form of a triangle there. And the 3 sides then, the subject and the object and the community, they represent the core elements of the system. And then the corners representing the tools, the rules, and the division of labor represent the mediating means to the main elements.
The present study is based on qualitative research, including 2 creativity workshop cases, case 1 and case 2 here, designed to provide a framework for primary and preschool teachers to assess potentials of digital game-based learning. Accordingly, a number of selected apps in the areas of math, language, and science were introduced to the participants, aligned with an assessment framework to value the app's learning designs in terms of content and form. They were divided into groups, the teachers, and to choose a game and to jointly evaluate the game. Case 1 included 9 female primary school teachers from schools in southwest Halland, Sweden. The 9 teachers were divided into 3 groups. In one of the groups, the teachers were from the same school and teacher team. The remaining groups included participants from different schools. Case 2 included 3 male participants in Northern Jutland, Denmark, a preschool teacher, a leader of preschools, and an assistant professor in a teacher education program focusing on mathematics. In addition, there were also a female game designer from India. The case 2 participants worked together in one group. Each group had a designated workstation where a fixed camera facing the table center was set up and recorded the activities at each workstation. In total, we gathered 400 minutes of video data. Additional 80 minutes of video data from case 2 were lost, and therefore the 4 participants in case 2 were interviewed a while after the workshop to capture the future insights on the topic of digital game-based learning in classroom settings.
And the procedure of the workshop that the participants were involved in was divided into 4 parts. And the first part here of the workshop, the participants could explore the different game apps that we had selected for them. I will come to that later. And in part 2 of the workshop, they had 15 minutes to do that, the part 1. And the part 2 was that they could play and assess the app that they choose to further evaluate. And they played around these the game by focusing on its design and the didactical potentials. And then the third part of the workshop, the teachers or the participants should develop a teaching activity that included the chosen game app. And finally, then part 4, they should present, the participant presented the results for each other. And then we had a closing of the workshop and evaluation of it. And we had decided on the games that they could choose among. And so we had chosen language, then Swedish or Danish, and mathematics and science. And we did this choosing based on these are the subjects that where digital games most often are used. So these were in the first part of the workshop. They could try out then these language and the math and the science game, and then they choose which one they wanted to further evaluate. Oh, that was wrong way. So,
thank you. So in the workshop part 1, the participants had time to test the different apps and choose one of them to assess, as well as to design a teaching activity, as Eva said. This was followed by a longer session in the second part of the workshop, where they should more in detail play and assess the game design to get ideas about how the game could be used for a specific teaching activity. This part of the workshop was assisted by a list of questions to guide the evaluation, which the participants got beforehand from us. And here you can see the question listed. What is the goal and value of the game? Is it clear and pedagogically convincing? Why or why not? What kind of learning goals can the game cover? The game interface, is it easy and efficient to navigate? What are the rules, control, and other mechanics of the game? How can the player learn and understand those rules and mechanics? Is the game balanced by offering different game levels? If so, in what way? What kind of mechanisms or values would encourage the child to play it again? In what way has the game an aesthetic value? What kind of game? Is it based on exploration, problem solving, contesting, or a mixture, perhaps? In what way is the game engaging, motivating? As a pedagogical expert, would you use this app in your teaching activities? Why or why not?
So the analytical approach that we applied is based on what we were talking about previously about the theoretical approach. It was based on Engelström's activity system, and we use that as an analytical tools. And if we the object of the workshop was that the participants should design teaching plans of a teaching and learning activity, including game-based learning. And the tools that we looked at then was the digital game apps that they had chosen. And the rules that we also had applied in our analysis was, for example, curriculum, schedule, timetables, division of labor, what was age and class levels, and school subjects. And then we had the corners. Then it's where the tool. It was digital game apps, and the community was the school, and then the subject, of course, were the teachers. And the object related to the integration of digital game-based learning in teaching activities to enhance children's learning. So these were the aspects that we included in our analysis.
In addition to this model, we used an interaction analysis approach consisting of 5 analytical steps. First, we gathered an overall view of the material by studying the video material. Second, we identified events in the material. Third, we transcribed the identified events. Fourth, we analyzed the events in relation to the activity system model adapted by Engelström that Eva just showed. And lastly, we identified themes in the material.
So then, by applying Engelström's model and the thematic analysis, there were 3 emerging themes. And one was the formation of pedagogical functions of the digital games. And the second theme was discovering gaps in the digital games. And the third theme was constructive resistance. And we will go through them now.
The first theme embraces how the teachers consider the digital games as mediating tools in their teaching activities. The design and structure of the games were in focus when the teachers tried to identify their pedagogical functions, with emphasis on how the game design supported learning. Considering this, the discussions about what a game is or could be in an educational context was necessary for the teachers to clear out before considering the pedagogical functions. For example, in several of the groups, the teachers referred to basic game design criteria while assessing the game that they had chosen. Through this process, they identified that the game perhaps was not a game due to having other pedagogical qualities compared to a game. The latter should include, for example, a clear goal, levels, and rewards. By this, the teachers explored a common language to first understand what the game is and then consider its pedagogical potentials. Another example within this theme is how the teachers tried to find out how a game could enhance children's learning. They did this by identifying that the game as such could not stand by itself as a learning tool, but they as teachers needed to take on a mediating role to establish a pedagogical relevance in relation to a specific subject like science or language or mathematics.
And the theme of discovering gaps in the digital games focused on what the teachers were doing when they were translating and assessing the games. And gaps in this theme were types of breaks or holes causing incontinuities as well as breaks in understanding what is going on in the games. So the teachers or the participants then, they identified gaps between their own pedagogical beliefs. And these beliefs were very, very much aligned with the Danish or Swedish curriculum and the game's design. So for instance, the curriculum related to early years education emphasizes children's play and exploration of the world, while the teachers thought, the participants thought that the games were not directed to this age group because they didn't include any of these matters. So they stressed that the game couldn't be used to enhance children's learning as they represent a completely different pedagogical angle. And the teachers, they underlined that when a game doesn't offer exploration or encourage curiosity, a game's design becomes simplistic and children lose their interest. So what that meant was that there was a gap between the game mechanics and the game's pedagogical relevance and usefulness. And this theme then draws attention to significant gaps between educational game designs and pedagogical regulations expressed in the curriculum.
The third theme, constructive resistance, shows how the teacher's initial resistance to the games they have chosen to evaluate changed over time while assessing the games. While resistance often is considered as holding back change in educational activities, research suggests that resistance in learning is not only to be against something, but also an exploratory pathway that can generate learning. In our findings, the unknown territory of appropriating digital educational games was at start in the form of questioning their relevance. By trying out the games, the teachers became more familiar with the content and could identify properties in the games that potentially could be adopted to be used in learning situations. In case 2, the resistance was pretty strong and led to productive thoughts about alternative game designs as expressed in their discussions, the teachers' discussions. While as in case 1, there was resistance when the game did not fit at all, that they were tied to the traditional view of the material used. But still, the teachers started redesigning the game and were excited about it in the end.
So to conclude then, this study contributed to the field in 2 ways. And first, the results have shown that in order for teachers to implement digital game-based learning in teaching activities, they need to have knowledge about the games. And because it was the knowledge of the game that they got by playing around with it that also evoked their pedagogical thoughts about how it could be used. And second, then, the outcomes of the study showed that the teachers were confident in discussing games' subject-specific value, which enabled them to apply the pedagogical expertise. The academic contribution then, the use of and the activity system approach to analyze digital game-based learning when focused on resistance and constraints contributed to the lack of research in that area. So by this then we added knowledge on teachers' views on and resistance to the integration of DDBL in teaching activities. Because we saw indications on that there was a great potential, like we said before, but the reluctance to use them eased up while they were playing the game. So that is also a theoretical contribution that are in line with Engeström's theories.
Finally, we'd like to thank all the teachers who participated in this project, in this research. And we will also thank Nordplus Horizontal for funding this research project. Thank you very much for your attention.
And by this, we finish the presentation and look forward to your questions. Bye-bye.
Bye.